Tonight, Donald Trump backs down on his military threat. Then, Trump is a framework for a deal on Greenland.
Really fantastic for the USA. Gets everything we wanted.
Well, he wanted ownership. Did he get that? No softening of the Trump tone for Canada, though.
Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
The Carney speech that got Trump so hot under the collar. Prince Harry returns to London for an emotional day in court.
He was keen to battle it out.
And chasing a bold ambition on the short track, the most Canadian medals ever.
One of the best teams we've ever had.
Up close with those dynamic speed skaters.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us. After escalating threats from tariffs to potential military action against Europe and NATO allies over his desire for Greenland, tonight Donald Trump has backed down. The U.S. president announcing what he referred to as the concept of a deal involving mineral rights and Arctic defense, an apparent change of heart after weeks of demanding nothing less than U.S. ownership, and vows to take the territory from Denmark, as he put it, the easy way or the hard way. But Katie Simpson shows us, as with many things related to Trump, nothing about this deal is completely clear or certain, including whether it's a deal at all.
The future of Greenland is apparently under active negotiation, the framework for a possible deal now in place, all according to U.S. President Donald Trump.
It's a deal that people jumped at. Really fantastic for the USA.
Trump offered no specifics and declined to say whether the U.S. would control Greenland.
It's a long-term deal, and I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
On social media, he credited what he called a very productive meeting with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte. And as a result, he will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st on European countries opposed to U.S. control of Greenland. Rutte also declined to discuss whether the U.S. would be in control.
That issue did not come up anymore in my conversations tonight with the President.
The development coming just hours after Trump walked back his threat to use military force while still appearing determined to control Greenland.
And I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. They have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
In his speech at the World Economic Forum, Trump denigrated NATO allies, questioning their military capabilities and commitment.
But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us.
Saving particularly harsh language for Canada.
We're building a Golden Dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not.
Trump's willingness to reach an agreement may be motivated by another key factor. Markets closed down significantly on Tuesday as investors appeared spooked by Trump's hostile rhetoric toward Greenland.
The bond market and the stock market really have a lot of influence on him. And when it goes down almost 900 points and people do interpret it as a sell America trade, that may well have been the reason he backed down.
After Trump announced he had a framework for a possible deal, markets surged. This is not the first time a Trump policy walkback has triggered this kind of investor reaction. It's happened several times when he adjusted his tariff plans.
And yet, Katie, we still don't know very much about this framework for a possible deal.
Yeah, the head of NATO would only say it's about trying to meet Trump's vision to improve security in the Arctic. Several U.S. news outlets say an agreement could include American control of some military bases, but it's important to point out that a treaty from the 1950s already gives the U.S. power to ramp up its military presence in Greenland.
All right, Katie, that is Katie Simpson in Washington. Chris Brown is in London tonight with more on the reception of Trump's sudden announcement. So, Chris, how's the news landing in Europe?
Well, it's pretty late here when this news of a framework deal broke. It's not clear that European leaders, including Denmark's or Greenland's, were even part of these negotiations. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said this day is ending better than it began. He also said what's important is that this ends in a way that respects Greenland's people. Sweden's Foreign Minister Maria Stennergaard said, "We've repeated that we will not be blackmailed. It appears that our work together with allies has had an impact." On the other hand, Adrian, a cautionary note from Germany's finance minister, Lars Klingbeil. He warned against premature optimism. Don't get your hopes up, he said. And there's a lot of good reason to hold off on the celebrations. Just a few hours before, of course, Trump had told that Davos gathering that Denmark essentially owed the United States for Greenland, for payback, if you will, for decades of military support. After his initial speech, I talked to a Danish analyst who said perhaps a collective resolve of Europe meant Trump might finally be seeing that he might be having to pay too high a price to get Greenland, and that message might be getting through to the White House.
Okay, so that's interesting. The EU, Chris, had planned an emergency summit for Thursday to talk about Trump's tariff threat and their response. That meeting will still go ahead, though. Trump's tariffs won't, it seems.
Right. So he won't impose 10% tariffs that would kick in on 8 countries starting February the 1st. And the amount was to go up to 25%, he said, until he got Greenland. Now, the EU initially did not retaliate, but what it did do is postpone ratification of a trade deal with the U.S. and raise the possibility of hitting roughly $150 billion Canadian worth of U.S. goods with European tariffs. The emergency summit is going ahead in Brussels in part because European countries really don't seem to know what's been agreed to. And even if this is the end of the crisis, and we don't know it is, there's obviously a lot of damage that's been done. There's a real sense of betrayal in Denmark. Trump slagged its contributions to NATO, belittled the Danish military. He trashed Europe, saying it's weak and ineffective. And he also said that the U.S. spends trillions of dollars on NATO and gets nothing. And all of that leaves hard feelings and destroys trust. Adrian.
Hey, thank you for this. That is Chris Brown in London. Now, Donald Trump also reacted to what became a marquee event at Davos, Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech. As Kate McKenna explains, Carney may not have mentioned Trump by name, but he didn't have to.
A day after Mark Carney's World Economic Forum speech, reviews are in. U.S. President Donald Trump was not a fan.
I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Carney left Davos without meeting Trump and hasn't responded to the president's comments, instead letting Tuesday's speech do the talking.
When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
On American TV, Canada's ambassador to the U.S. challenged the president's words.
Address this part of it. Canada lives because of the United States.
Canada lives because of the strength of Canadians, because of the ingenuity and hard work of Canadians.
Carney's speech was widely shared for its message about how middle powers must band together in order to survive a world where major powers push them around.
The old order is not coming back.
Trump wasn't named, but the implication was clear.
What makes this moment unusual is that a Canadian Prime Minister is actually participating in shaping the evolution of the international system.
But there are also concerns about whether Trump will somehow hit back ahead of a planned review of the free trade agreement known as CUSMA.
I thought it was an extremely powerful speech. I do think that every time any Canadian politician speaks now, it's like we're walking on eggshells.
Clearly, with Canada hanging in the balance with respect to renewed talks around the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement, that does not bode well.
The Prime Minister is back in Canada after a trip around the world intended to lessen Canada's reliance on the United States. His legacy and potentially the country's future may depend on whether he's able to do so. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Coming up, we'll break down Mark Carney's Davos speech and take a closer look at exactly why it seems to have angered the U.S. president. Well, the U.S. says it has begun transferring some ISIS detainees from northwestern Syria to Iraq amid fighting between Syria's government and Kurdish-led forces. Detainees gathered at the gates of one facility, Al-Hol, a sprawling camp holding thousands, mainly women and children, of ISIS fighters, while Syrian government troops assumed control. At another prison Monday, ISIS detainees escaped during the fighting, prompting the U.S. to begin transfers out of the area. The two sides have since entered into a shaky truce. And that was an Israeli strike in Lebanon. It says it hit multiple weapon sites for the militant group Hezbollah. Lebanon's health ministry says 19 were injured, though Israel's military said it issued warnings to evacuate. Israeli strikes have occurred regularly during a 14-month ceasefire. Under the truce, Hezbollah is supposed to be disarmed, a condition Israel says has not been met. And that is a dad clutching the body of his son, one of two 13-year-old boys killed by separate Israeli strikes in Gaza, according to local hospitals. They say strikes killed a total of 11, including 3 journalists who were filming at the request of Egyptian authorities at a new displacement camp set up by Cairo. Israel said it was targeting suspects there who were operating a Hamas drone. Well, back here in Canada, Ontario's premier and auto sector leaders came out swinging today on their opposition to Canada's trade deal with China. It will see Chinese electric vehicles enter the country. Lisa Shing now with the concerns and some potential benefits.
Auto industry leaders and Ontario's premier with a warning to Ottawa.
By opening up our country to a flood of cheap, made-in-China vehicles, the federal government is asking Canadian auto workers to compete on unfair ground.
Amid a fractured relationship with the U.S., Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a new deal with China last week, scrapping 100% tariffs on electric vehicles made there and letting up to 49,000 of them into the country each year, taxed at 6.1%. In exchange, China's easing its counter tariffs on Canadian canola, seafood, and pork.
Trading off one sector for the other in Canada is going to leave at least one sector very unhappy.
Doug Ford pointing to other markets where factories have closed, in part due to competition from Chinese car makers. Volkswagen shuttered a plant in Germany last month.
Did they close the factories because the overall market is shrinking, or did they close the factories because of Chinese vehicle imports? I don't know the answer to that question.
We should be able to see more affordable electric cars.
The head of the Electric Vehicle Society, representing drivers, says cheaper cars here means more people will buy them.
We should see significant rebounding of electric vehicle sales in Canada and catch up with the rest of the world.
When Honda and Toyota started making cars in Canada in the 1980s, a similar fear among North American car makers spurred them to change, according to this professor.
They started building superior products. Their factories became more efficient and more modern with higher quality output.
But Ford has a different view.
Boycott the Chinese EV vehicles.
And he says support companies making vehicles in Canada. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
A Toronto jeweler is being accused of controlling the finances for fugitive Ryan Wedding's alleged drug empire. At a bail hearing, the prosecution alleged that Roland Sokolowski acted as the third in command. Sokolowski's lawyer said that description is not supported by evidence, and his client is not a flight risk if released on bail. The 37-year-old faces extradition to California, where U.S. prosecutors have made similar allegations. And a federal court has overturned the government order to shut down TikTok's Canadian subsidiary. The China-based social media giant says it welcomes today's reprieve. The Trudeau government's order was a response to security concerns around the company, but use of the app by Canadians was never under threat. The matter is now back in government hands. And an emotional Prince Harry gave testimony today in his privacy lawsuit against the Daily Mail's publisher. As Griffin Yeager explains, Harry says the paper made his wife's life an absolute misery, and he's accusing it of using dirty tricks.
From the palace to the tabloids to the witness box. At London's High Court Wednesday, Prince Harry was met by a media frenzy. He's one of 7 high-profile figures, including Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, suing the publisher of the Daily Mail, claiming their privacy was violated for decades. For Harry, it's the 3rd such trial against British tabloids.
He's no stranger to being in the witness box. So when he got the chance to put his case in front of the judge, he was keen to battle it out.
Harry says he was the target of unlawful information gathering conducted by private investigators, alleging they hacked his phones, tapped landlines, and obtained his records through deception. Harry testified to the personal cost, saying that by sitting up here and taking a stand against them, they continue to come after me, and holding back tears that the tabloids made his wife Meghan Markle's life an absolute misery.
He is furious still about the way in which his life has been affected by the newspapers.
The publisher calls the claims preposterous smears. Its lawyer, Anthony White, argued the stories came from legitimate sources, characterizing the Duke's friends as leaky, a claim Harry rejected.
The difficulty for the newspaper...
Harry's won privacy cases before, but this lawyer says this fight is different.
In this instance, the journalists are coming along to defend their journalism. In the previous cases, the journalists have been notably reluctant to come and defend their journalism and explain what the sources were. And so we are now waiting, I think, to see how the newspaper answers the allegations.
The Daily Mail is one of Britain's most popular tabloids.
Ultimately, this isn't about celebrity grievance. It's a case about whether powerful publishers respected the rule of law. And if the claimants are right, this trial could reshape the story of modern British journalism.
The trial is set to last 9 weeks. Griffin Yeager, CBC News, Toronto.
Donald Trump's announcement of a Greenland deal only heightens the issue of Arctic sovereignty across the North.
The only way we will manage to safeguard it and to make sure that we remain Canadians is by everybody getting involved.
What Canada can learn from Nordic nations when it comes to security. Next. Plus, just weeks before the Winter Olympics, Canada's short track speed skaters are primed and ready.
That team is one of the best teams we've ever had, and I just wanted them to realize it.
Their hopes for a record-setting games. And later, as a BC mill closes its doors, concern for some longtime inhabitants.
I've always been concerned when I'm not here, who's going to look after them.
The workers stepping up to save a colony of feral cats. We're back in 2.
At the peak of the night, we had 125 fire events.
This 4-alarm fire in Montreal was reported late Tuesday and burned through the night. The Jacques Cartier Bridge was closed early this morning over concerns that billboards on top of the burning structure could topple into traffic. The historic building from 1910 has been vacant for years. Well, as Arctic sovereignty dominates headlines, Canada hosted a meeting today to hear about the approach some allies take. Aaron Collins shows us how their strategy relies on more than just the military.
A frigid northern day, setting the scene for talks on resilience in the Arctic. Representatives from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Iceland, and Finland gathering in Yellowknife. Panels on Arctic sovereignty and defense on the agenda here.
I've often said that we're carved from the same block of ice.
The backdrop for these talks, Donald Trump's on-again, off-again pursuit of Greenland. That tension highlighting these Nordic countries' unique approach to defense. One that involves more than just the military.
In Sweden, we've had this, we call it total defense approach, but it is about making the whole society, I mean, not just government on different levels, prepared for any kind of emergency or crisis.
That all-hands-on-deck approach able to quickly mobilize citizens in a time of crisis, helping to prepare for anything from an invasion to a natural disaster.
We are also communicating with them, coming up with advice on how to be prepared. Water, electricity, medicine.
And military experts here in Canada say we can learn from our Nordic neighbors, perhaps opening a conversation into some form of national service.
We're a very big country with a very small population. The only way we will manage to safeguard it and to make sure that we remain Canadians is by everybody getting involved.
More investment here in the Arctic, a must to prepare for future challenges too.
If you had a situation where the people of the North said, boy, Canada's looking after us well, the rest of the world would look and say, Canada cares. And right now they would look at that and say, you've got to be joking.
Better access to basics like water, power, and transport links, all part of that notion of collective security. Of course, the notion that Canada should spend more here in the North isn't a new one. The question now is whether Donald Trump's fixation on the Arctic might help that idea stick this time. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The excitement is growing for Canada's Olympic short track speed skating team.
It can happen. I hope it'll happen. It probably happened, honestly.
How they're hoping to reach new heights on the podium next month. Plus, Donald Trump had some pointed words for Mark Carney in Davos.
Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Why Carney's major foreign policy speech seems to have gotten under Trump's skin. Plus, a survivor of sexual assault, she helped train police. Now she's speaking out.
I felt dismissed. I felt judged.
The harmful biases she says she encountered from 2 officers. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next.
Boy, are yelling over the barriers there.
So that is world champion Hallie Clark, now the youngest member of Team Canada's Olympic skeleton team. She will be joined by Jane Channel in the women's event, while Joseph Brusick will race in the men's. The team was announced in Calgary just 1 week after being cleared of allegations made by a U.S. slider that their coach had rigged an Olympic qualifying event. Canada's best short track speed skaters are in Montreal this week, racing towards the Milano Cortina Olympics with big goals and even bigger expectations. As Sarah Levitt shows us, the team hopes to make history and look good doing it.
It's go time for Canada's short track speed skating team, just 2 weeks shy of the Winter Olympics. And expectations are high for the 10 athletes, led by the champions of this year's season, William Dangenou and Courtney Sereau.
That team is one of the best teams we've ever had, and I just wanted them to realize it and to keep pushing it.
Marc Gagnon knows what he's talking about. He was part of the winningest short track team in Canadian Olympic history, bringing home 6 medals at the 2002 Winter Games in Salt Lake City. Today's team hopes to break that record and bring in 7.
I feel like it can happen. I hope it'll happen. It probably happened, honestly.
Dangenou fell just shy of qualifying for the Beijing Olympics in 2022, but has since proven himself a formidable opponent.
The focus is to be as prepared as I can. Obviously, I know what I can do, and you guys tend to remind me of what I can do. And I feel like I can do great things.
The team is going to be skating in style with helmets made exclusively for them by a 20-year-old Quebecer.
William, voilà mon gars.
A speed skater and artist, Simon Olivier Côté added a little bit of individuality into each helmet, like the fleur de lis to represent Quebec.
I'm sure they're going to do super well. And knowing the fact that they're going to wear my helmets, this is surreal. This is really cool.
For Courtney Sereau, the hype of the Olympics is a sidebar. She wants to treat it like any other competition.
I'm happy that my best season is the one going into the Olympics, I guess, to say the least. With that said, it does put, I guess, if I think about it too much, maybe I could put pressure on myself.
Still, representing Canada in the highest level of sport is an honor, every athlete on the ice says. One they won't soon forget, made all the better if they come home with gold. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Time now to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. A sexual assault survivor who volunteered to help train future investigators severs her ties with Ontario's police college.
It's like those officers missed the whole point of the talk.
Why she's sounding the alarm over harmful police biases. But first,
Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark.
pointed words from the U.S. president aimed squarely at Mark Carney. But what put the Canadian Prime Minister in Donald Trump's crosshairs this time? Andrew Chang, host of About That, breaks down how Carney's words got under the president's skin.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not.
Donald Trump just gave a more than 1 hour speech to world leaders in Davos, Switzerland. It's usually an economic forum, but now more like a battlefield.
I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us.
In that roughly hour and 15-minute speech, about 20 seconds were devoted to Canada specifically. I've already played you about 12 of those seconds. Here are the remaining 8.
Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
I'm going to explain what the President of the United States was reacting to and on what level this sours an already strained relationship.
There is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. So what are our options?
The day before Trump spoke, it was Mark Carney's turn to address the room. His speech was, in effect, to frame the US-led world order as irreversibly ruptured. And he made this point with a story.
Every morning, this shopkeeper places a sign in his window. Workers of the world unite. He doesn't believe it. No one does. But he places the sign anyway to avoid trouble, to signal compliance, to get along.
This is a parable from an essay written by Václav Havel almost 50 years ago, answering how communism sustains itself. The analogy here, of course, being with how the world placates Donald Trump.
And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists. Not through violence alone, but through the participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down.
Now, this is a clever bit of politics in the sense that, like many grand speeches touching on prickly subjects, it's both direct and vague at the same time. And maybe this wouldn't have been so provocative if not for 2 things. First, that Carney's entire speech was about this, about a strategic pivot away from America. But the second thing, he named America explicitly.
This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. This bargain no longer works.
What we have to do is what he called sort of a principled pragmatism, being realistic, very hard-nosed about where we have interests and arranging our relations, our foreign relations on that basis. It's fascinating to me and very revealing that the Prime Minister is spelling this out as a statement of Canadian foreign policy.
Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
Donald Trump, of course, was listening to all of this.
After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. But we gave it back. But how ungrateful are they now?
This word, ungrateful, seems to keep resurfacing with Trump and his administration. In Davos, he devoted a big part of his speech to ripping into Denmark for not wanting to sell Greenland to the United States. But 2 things about this framing of gratitude. One is that it's more feeling than fact, almost like this is personal for Trump. But 2, there's not really a clear separation between where Trump's feelings meet Trump's policies. Trump's attempt to force Denmark to sell its territory to the United States was backed up by what Denmark called blackmail. The explicit threat of tariffs starting at 10%, escalating to 25% on European countries who oppose the US on this. Though it's apparently possible that threat will be reined in.
Donald Trump says he and the head of NATO have agreed to the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland. The U.S. president also says he will no longer impose tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st.
And Trump's feelings about Canada?
They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us.
That was also linked to something much more impactful and tangible.
We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada.
Canada has already signaled to the US government it wants to play a role in Trump's vision for continental missile defense. But it's not at all clear how that role could bend and sway depending on Trump's mood. And you don't have to look much further than Ukraine to see an extreme version of how this can play out in practice.
You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times to American people.
You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You got to be more thankful. Because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards. You're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think, huh?
Again, it's tempting to just say, this is politics. A few months later, they're shaking hands as if nothing had happened. But arguably, matching the erratic nature of Trump's personal relationship with Ukraine's president, you've got a less than coherent American policy position vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine, as in the US is in Zelensky's corner until it's not. There's military hardware support from the US until there's not.
Presidents generally are able to make a distinction between their interests, their personal interests, their political interests, and the interests of the country. Sometimes those things conflict, and then we expect that a president will put the interests of the country ahead of his own or his party's interests. We don't see that with Trump. We see him looking at relationships between countries as purely about how are people treating me? Were they nice to me? Do they respect me?
We take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be.
It's hard to imagine Mark Carney feeling good about taking this kind of stand against Trump's presidency. The risk and the stakes are enormous, with more than 3/4 of everything Canada makes being sold to just one country. A country which also happens to have a population, economy, and military somewhere between, 8 and 30 times bigger than ours. But maybe Carney feels like he has no choice.
I don't think that Carney and other NATO leaders have had any option but to stand up and say, this is enough.
Trump has spent a year injecting chaos and disruption into every aspect of American policy, whether it be domestic, international, military. Prime Minister Carney and leaders of other nations present at the World Economic Forum are starting to come to terms with the fact that they are going to have to figure out how to live in a world where the United States is not the stable anchor of an international order.
And so it goes. For better or for worse, Carney has staked out Canada's new position. He claimed that ground when he signed a new trade deal with China.
Everything is all right?
Everything is excellent. Mr. President, together we can build on the best of what this relationship has been in the past to create a new one, adapted to new global realities.
He claimed that ground when he took Greenland's side against Trump.
We're concerned about this escalation, to be absolutely clear.
And he claimed that ground when he decided that much of the world could no longer count on the United States.
The new world order.
So where that leaves things now is the leader of the world's most powerful nation reminding another of his place.
Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that. Mark, the next time you make your statements.
To which the response to threats like this is to find new ground and see who will follow.
In a world of great power rivalry, the countries in between have a choice. Compete with each other for favor, or to combine to create a third path with impact. We shouldn't allow the rise of hard power to blind us to the fact that the power of legitimacy, integrity, and rules will remain strong if we choose to wield them together.
Now, the two leaders did not get a chance to meet face-to-face today. The Prime Minister left Davos before Donald Trump was scheduled to deliver his address. Coming up, a sexual assault survivor ends her relationship with Ontario's police college.
I felt absolute anger, and I wanted somebody to be accountable.
Why she's calling for accountability and an end to harmful biases. Next. Calls for accountability from a sexual assault survivor who claims comments by police left her feeling humiliated.
I felt dismissed. I felt judged.
Accusations of harmful biases about two Ontario police officers.
It's really disheartening.
The sexual assault survivor, who regularly shared her experiences at police training courses, is ending her relationship with the college. And as Angelina King tells us, she wants answers and an apology.
I felt dismissed. I felt judged. I felt absolute anger, and I wanted somebody to be accountable for that.
CBC Toronto isn't identifying her because she's the victim of sexual assault. For years, she'd been invited by the Ontario Police College to share her story with officers training to be sexual assault investigators. Her hope? To create positive change for other sexual assault survivors and educate police on how to best interact with victims. But she was appalled after her last two presentations because of feedback comments left by two officers who had just completed the 10-day course. One comment in a class evaluation form from last January said in part, "She is far too damaged to be presenting her story. I don't believe she has taken the initiative to want to improve herself." After her presentation in March, another officer wrote, "She showed courage to speak, but I think she should see a psychologist for her obvious PTSD."
It's like those officers missed the whole point of the talk. They missed the point of being trauma-informed. They missed the point of seeing the sexual assault survivor, victim for who they are, not who they think they should be. They missed the part of not making judgments, of not carrying their bias into the situation.
She complained to the police college in August about the comments, writing, "At minimum, I expect an apology and for these officers to be removed from their role as sexual assault investigators." The director said he'd look into it, but 5 months later, still no response.
There are a lot of questions, like, did these officers pass the course? Because that's mandatory to become a sexual assault investigator in Ontario. And are they sexual assault investigators? And if so, in which communities? We reached out to the Ontario Police College and the Ministry of the Attorney General, which oversees the college. Our interview request was declined, and the ministry didn't answer our specific questions, only saying,
The ministry and the Ontario Police College recognize the profound courage it takes for survivors of sexual violence to share their stories and the importance of creating a space that is safe to do so. The OPC is following up directly with the survivor to address the situation.
That's not accountability. At the end of the day, accountability requires transparency.
Danielle McNabb is an assistant professor who specializes in police oversight.
Certainly, providing information at minimum is necessary for police accountability and for maintaining public trust.
It's really disheartening.
Sunny Mariner is a prominent advocate and expert on sexual assault survivors' experiences with the Canadian justice system. She says if those officers are working on sexual assault cases, that's a problem.
A lot of the stereotypes that we saw in the comments, those are sometimes root causes of why investigations go sideways. If you are hearing that through a filter where that what the survivor is saying is becoming less credible to you because you don't have that understanding of the impacts of sexual assault, that's automatically going to lead to discounting reports of sexual violence. We see this again and again, so it's extremely detrimental.
The survivor says she wants the college to review how it handles situations like this.
Have they learned from their mistake? That's the question. And how are they preventing this from happening in the future?
Even if those questions are answered once the college reaches out to her, she says the damage is done. She no longer feels comfortable sharing her story with the college, a learning opportunity provided by her to police in Ontario, now lost.
Now, as you heard in Angelina's reporting, Ontario's Ministry of the Solicitor General said the police college would reach out to the survivor. She has still not heard from the college. Well, support is available for anyone affected by sexual assault. You can contact endingviolencecanada.org, or for immediate help, always call 911. Here's another story we're working on here at the National, a radioactive risk which could be killing thousands of Canadians each year.
There's no test that they can, blood work, whatever they could pull from me and conclusively say it was your basement that gave you this cancer, it's the house that's going to kill you.
So you installed a monitor down here?
Yes.
How did you feel when you started to see those readings coming in, that it was consistently high?
Yeah, it definitely started saying that, hey, there's something wrong here. There's something that needs to be changed here, and this may be, a culprit of my current situation and my condition.
It was really tough to swallow that that's really what he's diagnosed with, stage 4 lung cancer.
I still turn around and go, why me? I did all the things I'm supposed to do properly.
You have about a third of Canadians who live in single-family housing who are at some elevated risk of lung cancer. And a good 1 in 5 of those who are really at risk. So while we can't normally see radon, we can absolutely see the effect of it once it hits our lungs.
And what we're seeing here, these breaks in the DNA, what does that actually mean for someone if this was happening in your body?
What those mean are genetic mutations, and that is the cause of all cancers.
If we know that there's radon everywhere in Canada, why isn't it code to have a mitigation system to prevent it from even happening in the first place?
You can catch Lauren Pelly's full story, Radon Invisible Killer, Monday night right here on The National. Well, coming up, a colony of cats finds new homes after a BC mill closes.
When it sunk in that I wouldn't be able to see them anymore, I was absolutely devastated.
The worker who helped rescue them next in our moment. These are some of the cats that live at the Crofton Mill plant on Vancouver Island. They're strays. They've been cared for by workers around the site. Tawny Marcel has been looking after the colony for nearly a decade. So when she got the call that the mill would be closing down, she sprung into action to help save the cats, and that makes our moment.
Hi, guys! Hi, guys! It's like coming to work and having pets that you love like your own at home. The week after I found out the mill was closing down, I got a hold of a couple of rescues, and we just started to put a plan together and started saving the cats. They are all being fostered right now. For me, that was my biggest concern. I've always been concerned when I'm not here, who's going to look after them. The cats have been here for, probably as long as the mill has. Probably about 9 years ago was when I started full-time taking care of them. I started paying for the food, me and a few other people, and making sure that they were okay. When it sunk in that I wouldn't be able to see them anymore, I was absolutely devastated. I felt like I was abandoning them, really. Every time I see them, they come running to me. They've been like my pets. They're all going to live their lives out in a, place where they can be indoors and outdoors, or basically wherever they want. It's awesome.
And yeah, it's great news there that Tony says most of them have been fostered. There are about 13 of the cats left, originally around 30. They're all around like 12 to 15 years old. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.